Welcome back, everyone, to the top 16 of Victory Road's World Cup, sponsored by Elgato, GG Tour, and Metafi. I'm Yuki, and I'm joined here by Hayden, who's making the return after the post World Championships. How's it going, Hayden?
Yeah, very excited to finally be back. I really missed casting World Cup. Worlds is an acceptable reason to set it aside for a bit, and it was wonderful to watch those matches. But I'm really excited to be back here. And I think we have just such a spectacular match coming up here, and a few more for the rest of the day. They're all going to be such a treat to be able to cast.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have, a player coming up soon who just had an incredibly strong performance at Worlds. Really excited to see if they're able to translate it over to the World Cup. And yeah, I just love being able to see, still have a competitive scene after the World Championships, which, otherwise might be a little bit dead. But, thanks to Victory Road, we have this opportunity for players who may or may not have joined the World Championships still make a name for themselves. So, I'm excited to go into these matches. The first one was an absolute nail biter, just having so much diversity in strategies between the best of threes, and I'm curious to see how it goes. But yeah, we have Sam taking a 2-1 victory over Sebastian in the first match that we just casted over with Maeve, and we have Yin versus Raghav coming up. It's Singapore versus India, which is actually a 2-1 up for India, so it's still going to be a pretty impactful match, and we have some others coming up as well.
Yeah, so that last one was such a nail biter of a set. Some amazing players, very close, and I think we're in for just as much of a treat this time around. Again, having such high stakes on these first couple of matches that we're doing. And then the last three are still going to be spectacular matches. We're going to get to showcase lots of players. They might not be decisive for the outcome of the tournament, but they still affect players' records. They still affect how countries come out of this, what momentum they might have going forwards in terms of their record. And so plenty of treats for all of them, but definitely excited to get into this particular next match with Raghav and Wyan.
Exactly. Yeah, we have it's definitely a team-based sport, this Victory Road World Cup, but at the end of the day, if your team's already knocked out or you're already going through, then it might just be something that the player wants to perform to become the MVP. That's a very definitely a coveted after title. So yeah, whether the outcome of the match matters for the team or not, I'm sure the players will definitely be giving it their all.
Absolutely. We're going to move into talking about this particular country matchup here, where the stakes really are super high. We have a 2-1 start in favor of India, but really it's still anyone's game. If Singapore is able to get this one back, that brings it back to a tie. Even if India wins, there's still an opportunity for Singapore to get through, even if Raghav wins. So some interesting teams coming out so far. Nice to see that it's not completely decisive. Both teams have some victories on their record so far. Very excited to move on to this next match. Any particularly interesting Pokemon you're seeing here, Yuki?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going straight into seeing, Martin Teo's team over from Singapore using David Kutesh's team that he was able to get top 16 with at Worlds this year. I mean, it's just such an incredible, composition of 6 Pokemon. Like, you never see a DL get paired up with the Yveltal, but you also just don't see Gyarados at all in this Series 12 move set rule set. Like, I would just love to know when that Gyarados comes in. And they have some, a little bit more solid, max airstream users, etc. So I would love to see how that match turned out. But yeah, in general, I just feel like there's just a lot of rogue teams. We see something a little bit more standard being used by Hakeem, the Groudon, and Lunala. But I feel like every other team, is a little bit more, unconventional. Not a team that, necessarily had a big showing at the World Championships, but the players are clearly able to make it work and able to win with them. So I'm curious to see if this trend will continue between Raghav and Yin, or whether they'll use a little bit more established archetypes.
It's such an interesting thing too. Once we're into this post-Worlds meta game, we so rarely get to have this treat of everyone knows so much about all these spectacular teams, things that are fairly standard and well established, things that are new from the World Championships, like David Kutesh's team, this spectacular Gyarados Ferrothorn core, and then also players still being able to bring in their own little spin on what they're using. And I think it's really exciting to be able to see that mix in team selection, that you can choose whatever you'd like. You can choose something completely new. There's so much to prepare for, and there's so much history for so many of these different teams, or things that are completely new.
Yeah, definitely. But we're gonna go from the Pokemon to the players and dive right in. So we have Yin from Singapore here. You can just see some really impressive accolades, going back all the way to 2015, being a regional champion in Malaysia, getting a top 8 finish at the Singapore Nationals, and then also being a finalist in the June Open in Singapore in 2018. And on top of that, being a day 2 competitor at Worlds 3 times. I mean, I think for many players, just being able to compete at Worlds at all is a treat. Being able to qualify at all is a treat. But in Yin's case, she's able to compete there not only 3 times, but as a day 2 competitor, which is really, really impressive. And yeah, had a 4-3 record in last year's World Cup and is currently 1-0. And yeah, just a really veteran player that's known in the online community as Text Font.
Yeah, very exciting to see YN playing with all of these wonderful veteran accomplishments. And we've got Raghav, who's just had an incredible season facing up against her. A World's Day 2 competitor just a couple of weeks ago, went 6-0 in Day 1. What a spectacular showing. And then had a positive record in the next day of Day 2 Worlds, which is spectacular. We have North American Internationals, top 16 this year. Oceania, top 4 in 2020. With just a spectacular team back then. There was a Gorgeist, there were so many things that were so interesting. And Anaheim Regional Champion in 2019. Raghav, no stranger to success, especially in these last 5 or so years. Very excited to see what they both have to bring to this matchup.
Yeah, and we just see the team preview go right in, and we, just really counter to what trends we saw with the other teams. We see Yin use the very established Rinya Sun, whereas Raghav is using Naoto Mizuguchi's team that he used to get top 8 at Worlds this year, what some people have dubbed Rinya Moon, even though I don't think Rinya Kobayashi was part of making this team, but it's basically the Lunala switch in for the Zacian. I think it's quite interesting. These two teams are quite well known at this point. I believe Rinya Kobayashi has written a pretty extensive team report on his team, not just what he used at Worlds, but just throughout, all the different kinds of forms of Rinya's Sun and how it's supposed to be used, how it's supposed to be countered. So I'm curious to see if Yin read that as, kind of like a playbook to figure out how to face off against the other matchups. Whereas in Raghav's case, I wonder if he is, kind of aware of the ins and outs. For example, I wonder if Yin is using the weakness policy version or not.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many different... These tools are so well understood in this format. The Groudon, Incineroar, Grimmsnarl, Gastrodon, Charizard, and there's so much variety there could be in those sets. Is this like the new weakness policy form of Charizard? Is something older? There's so many different sets that could totally flip this matchup on its head if there's a Chartiberry or anything else.
Yeah, and we see a very stereotypical lead from both these kinds of teams. We have Incineroar and Grimmsnarl coming out from Raghav's side, whereas Yin has the Charizard Grimmsnarl. I think something I actually really want to point out is that in Rinya Kobayashi's report, he said that it is always safe to protect Charizard in these situations when you're facing down Incineroar and Grimmsnarl, because the Incineroar on the opposing side always goes for the parting shot into the Charizard instead of the Grimmsnarl. So, being able to switch out the Grimmsnarl for a Zacian and then protecting the Charizard ensures that you get a really good next turn where you can target down the Incineroar, target down the Grimmsnarl. So I'm curious to see if Yin has kind of read the user manual on that front or not.
We're going to see Yin is doing that switch in this potentially safe slot. You don't need Grimmsnarl to protect your Charizard against that Incineroar and Grimmsnarl on the opposing side. We're going to see if this Charizard protects against a possible parting shot, or if it decides to just go for that attack using Groudon Sun. We are going to see a Dynamax coming out, though. Most likely that's Charizard. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense for the other side to be Dynamaxing here. And we do see that Charizard going to be able to use that solar power in this first turn, putting out a whole lot of pressure. And it's definitely an open question how Raghav's going to be able to sort of mitigate this damage, position into the right thing against this Charizard doing so much damage. And we do see the light screen as a start. Presumably we'll see that parting shot in a moment. Maybe Incineroar will do something else, but in the meantime, that max airstream coming out, getting some good damage into Grimmsnarl, even through light screen, and getting a speed boost on that Groudon so that it'll be faster than everything else.
Yep, and we see the Incineroar go do the parting shot right into the Charizard as expected. Going to reduce its damage output even further on top of the screens. and be able to position a different Pokemon coming in from the back. I think one thing to watch out for is that the Charizard over on Yin's side has a pretty high HP stat. I believe it's about 181 or so. So it might indicate that it has the weakness policy. So, you know, if Wynn is able to set up a light screen down the line, then it might be able to take, you know, a rock type move from the Lunala and then counter with a really, really strong, you know, G-Max Wildfire. But as of now, it's staying with Max Airstream so that both of Yin's Pokemon are faster than Raghav's. And well, I'm curious to see if Raghav will, you know, go for the defensive with the Lunala or, you know, put back in Incineroar as we see here, and do something a little bit more defensive like Seppo Reflect, or even go for a Thunder Wave, which would be devastating for the Charizard.
So we're going to see a trick coming out here, presumably onto that Charizard, giving a lagging tail actually to the Groudon. And Grimmsnarl gets the Assault Vest, so it has a little bit more survivability for the moment. Can't do a whole lot of support. But that Wildfire going just into the Incineroar, a brilliant switch, as you mentioned, GP, just making sure that this Lunala is able to stay safe. You can do a bit more pivoting. The Shadow Claw that would have KO'd that Lunala after the Wildfire broke Shadow Shield, or done at least a whole lot of damage, instead going into that Incineroar from -1 attack. And this Groudon just went from this scary boosted speed attacking Behemoth to having -1 attack and always moving last now because it has that lagging tail. Raghav doing just an excellent job of controlling the pieces on Yin's side of the field.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Just a really excellent use of the team, baiting the opponent into attacking down the Lunala, which was so threatening. And having that lagging tail on the Groudon means that, you know, the Incineroar would be able to go for a parting shot or something even before it's able to attack, so that maybe a Charizard can come in safely, you know, being able to not take the Precipice Blades and then retaliate with G-Max of its own.
Absolutely. We're going to see this Spirit Break coming out. Fake out into that Groudon too. Not a whole lot of damage coming out from my inside of the field just yet. We do see now that's the end of the Dynamax, and this Charizard has not taken a single KO.
Yeah, not something that you want to be seeing as a player who is using the Charizard, especially with the weakness policy. I feel like the usual you know, reason that you want to use weakness policy on Charizard is so that basically you know, you're not going to target it at all, so you're just going to keep getting these G-Max Wildfires that are really strong and just get knockouts left and right, or you're going to activate the weakness policy and get a huge knockout on the opposing Dynamax. But Wynn got neither, and especially with this Ancient Power not getting the knockout on the Incineroar, I'd say Raghav was in an excellent position to bring in his own Charizard and yeah, just retaliate with his own Gigantamax, which is going to be you know, undisputed.
Ooh, anything coming in this slot is only going to have to take a -2 attack from this Groudon. Might not even be that. I believe we saw it click Precipice Blades and there's a Charizard coming in. Spirit Break going to come out, just getting a little bit more damage on this Groudon, putting it in range of a potential KO in the future. And yeah, Precipice Blades coming out, not going to do anything to Charizard, going to finish off that Grimmsnarl, but that's quite fortunate actually. Raghav is sort of able to bring in 2 Pokemon at no risk of them being damaged. The Incineroar could come right back in at low health, or the Lunala could come in at full. And this Charizard is in perfect position to Dynamax now. Raghav having survived so many turns of this Charizard, and also pivoting in a lot of fire types, so there's not much Wildfire residual damage.
Right, yeah, that's a great point. Just having the fire types sitting on the field, taking those hits from the ground on Charizard means that you're getting that much less mileage out of the G-Max Wildfires. So yeah, just excellent pivoting coming out from Raghav's end. And now he's able to retaliate with this Charizard. And, you know, no Grimmsnarl on sight from Wynn's end to, you know, mitigate the damage output at first. Might be able to bring it in the following turn, but definitely means that her Pokemon are going to take a lot of damage, especially for this turn. And, yeah, like, the Grimmsnarl just went out the perfect timing for Raghav. I think every possible turn is going his way.
We do see that the Charizard on Wynn's side is faster, and it gets an Ancient Power off, but that's not necessarily in Wynn's favor because of this weakness policy coming off. This Charizard, whatever it targets with this Max Airstream, is definitely fainting, no question about it. Groudon's going down. This Lunala has a speed boost, and it's going to be able to do whatever it likes this turn. And this Charizard has 2 more turns of Dynamax in prime position to damage anything. At most, the Grimmsnarl could maybe slow it down a little bit, but if this Meteor Beam connects, that's so many pieces down for Wynn and so many resources still left for Raghav.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, honestly, from Wynn's perspective, I really liked that she went for the Ancient Power into Raghav's Charizard for two reasons. One is that despite being in this really unfavorable position, if the Ancient Power is able to get a critical hit onto the Charizard, we saw the damage it did. If you remove the light screen boost, the parting shot, damage mitigation, and then the extra 50% from the Ancient Power, maybe it would have gotten the knockout on the opposing Charizard. So going for that extra 124 win condition, I think would be nice. And then the second reason is that I think with Wai Jingyan being in a pretty disadvantageous position, like you said, Raghav just has so much more resources than she does at this point. Be able to just get that information on whether the Charizard is the Charity Berry, if it's the weakness policy that we saw, getting that confirmation would be really, really big for her. So I think she definitely made the most out of that turn to get the information on the Charizard, and should be a lot easier for her to plan her second match.
Absolutely. You do not want to have to play around assuming that Charizard has a weakness policy and find out in Game 3 that it didn't have it. So wonderful to get that information. And there's still some potential here. If this Zacian's able to crit through and Intimidate, there's a couple of different opportunities to get this damage on this Charizard, going for, as you said, that 1 in 24 win condition. And we do have Grimmsnarl on Ryan's side of the field. She might be able to slow things down. Getting off that Thunder Wave, now that we know the Charizard isn't Lumberry, really just maximizing your chances of stopping this Charizard from being able to do what it does best. And this Behemoth Blade coming out, if it's a crit, that could totally flip this game. But if it isn't, and this Charizard attacks through Paralysis, then it's going to be a tough ask for Ryan. Oh, but there's a Paralysis. That's definitely one of the things that Ryan needed to start to try to pivot this game around.
Yeah, so I think really clever plays from both ends of that turn. I think it was great for Yin to, just basically add more variance to the game by including the Thunder Wave, going for the Behemoth Blade with the critical hit chance. On the other hand, I think Raghav did a great job of bringing the Incineroar for this turn, not only for the Intimidate, but in the case that, the Charizard doesn't move that turn thanks to the Thunder Wave, then he still has the opportunity to go for at least one more guaranteed turn of Charizard attempting to move thanks to the Fake Out going into the Zacian. And on top of that, the Grimmsnarl is not able to knock out the Charizard. So I think that was a really good heads-up play for Raghav, and definitely is rewarded for it as the Wildfire goes into the Grimmsnarl to knock it out. And now we have the 2v1 situation of the Lunala and Charizard versus the Zacian. And yeah, I think the Lunala, thanks to the Shadow Shield, I believe still intact, should be able to take care of this game.
Tale as old as the format. Once Zacian gets down to being 1 versus 2, it only has those single target attacks, then it's going to be really tough for it to be able to come back, especially because that Charizard did get off that Wildfire, and this does have Shadow Shield. It's a really uphill battle for the Zacian to be able to do anything. Maybe a super crit and surviving the Lunala attack and Charizard being paralyzed a lot gives you some options, but most likely Ryan and Raghav are going to start thinking about how to handle that next game. Raghav knows that this Thunder Wave exists on this Grimmsnarl, and it can add this variance to the game. Charizard can't always get those attacks. And so it's going to be a question of, how do I stop that? Do I just have to hope that I'm a bit lucky in the second game?
Right, and I think, according to Naruto's team report, Lunala is bulky enough so that it can survive a Behemoth Blade even through the Shadow Shield being broken. So I think it's pretty safe for Raghav to have this Lunala, despite the Shadow Shield being broken, to live through a Behemoth Blade. So I think barring any kind of critical hits, then Raghav has this first game. But again, this is Pokemon. There is variance every single move that does damage thanks to the critical hit mechanics. So Wyan's still in this, if the critical hit is able to happen, but going for the Protect to get at least one more turn of Wildfire damage onto the Zacian.
Yeah, there's an interesting little question with the Zacian surviving with 1 hit point. That safe win condition of I don't want to worry about that crit is no longer available. There's an interesting question here of whether the Lunala tries to go for a double Protect, because there's no point in attacking, and you get it, and so you don't even have to worry about that crit. Taking that from like a 1 in 24 to like a 1 in 36, that's such wonderful play from Raghav there, being able to just find the most consistent win condition and go for it.
Yeah, Hayden, I really, really love how you pointed that out just there, because, yeah, absolutely. There's no reason to go for the damage. If you know that you still have Wildfire turns left, then you can just say, hey, you're not going to win in 1 in 24. You're going to win in 1 in 72 or something like that. So just an excellent way of reducing your chances of losing even further. So I think that was a great way for Raghav to close out that first match.
Yeah, absolutely. And once again, thank you for pointing out like that Shadow Shield not being attacked on that Lunala meant Wyan really was playing to so many different win conditions here of being able to try to get crits or reads or paralyses. And I think looking at this match, I thought it might be a bit one-sided in terms of Raghav just having a slight advantage with that Lunala is a lot more nice to bring into something like a Charizard than the Zacian is. But this was definitely such a close set, even with how phenomenally Raghav played at the start. And it was really impressive to see sort of both of these players' end game play, trying to make this a really tight match and try to maximize their odds in both directions.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I want to talk a little bit about like how maybe Wyan could adjust in game two. I think I would like to see her think a little bit more long term, maybe less in the short term. Like in game one, I felt like she was kind of rushing to get rid of the Lunala. That was kind of an obvious bait from Raghav, and she would knock out the Grimmsnarl just to maybe get the knockout, but really. Just by seeing the Grimmsnarl go for Spirit Breaks on the Groudon, we knew that Raghav just wanted to see that Grimmsnarl go. So, if Wyan is able to get a little bit more tactical knockouts and not take the baits from Raghav, I think she could find a lot of success in the second game.
And we're seeing Wyan go to the definition of positional tactical play in this matchup, bringing that Gastrodon for the Yawn support potentially. It's going to just start off with the Yawn, and we're going to see how this Charizard plays. If it plays a little bit more defensively this time, like Yuki was mentioning, or if it maybe still goes for the Dynamax, maybe thinking it's in a better position with those Yawns to make it a little bit harder for your opponent to play around it.
Right, and I think, Wyan is in an excellent position here because, the Groudon can't really safely Dynamax, right? Like, if it Dynamaxes and, can't really pick up the Gastrodon here, then you kind of take a Yawn. So I think, she had the liberty to be able to go for a Dynamax on the Charizard without risking the Groudon going for a Dynamax of its own and retaliating with a Max Rockfall. But instead, it sounds like she switches out for the Zacian to be in a more favorable spot.
So we do see the Zacian switching in, but the Precipice Blades misses the wrong slot for Wyan, the right slot for Raghav, and hits that Zacian on the switch. A phenomenal outcome for this turn from Raghav to be able to catch that Charizard switching out, not going for a rock move, and catching that Zacian. Sure, the Yawn goes off and makes this Groudon's life a little bit more tough, but you have to be pretty happy about that if you're Raghav.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it just makes me wonder, like, what could have happened if the... if the Charizard had gone for the Gigantamax, it would have been unscathed this turn. No lagging tail in sight, and the Grimmsnarl would have basically been gone, and the Groudon would have had to either sleep or switch out. But now the tables are totally turned, and yeah, we might see a knockout coming out onto Wyan's Zacian.
Groudon, Grimmsnarl staying in, not afraid of that Behemoth Blade, getting the Reflect up, and Groudon taking very little damage, willing to accept the sleep from that Yawn in order to get rid of the Zacian and make sure that Wyan just loses one of her main offensive tools. Gastrodon gets an Earth Power off, does a little bit of damage into Groudon, but crucially, Groudon sort of accepting that sleep instead of letting Wyan get a ton of damage into a different slot, and especially with that Reflect mitigating the damage. It just felt like Raghav played that turn so well given what Wyan went for.
Yeah, absolutely. On the other hand, I'm a little bit curious about what was his thought process to letting the Groudon go to sleep, because basically he got out of it was a knockout onto the Zacian, but it wasn't necessarily guaranteed because he went for the Precipice Blades, right? Like a bit different, he went for like a Fire Punch or something to guarantee it, but it seemed like he just wanted to get a knockout on the Zacian probably and get some extra damage out on the Gastrodon. So maybe wanting to set up the Charizard in the back for Raghav. Maybe put the Gastrodon in range for a max airstream or something like that. But I think on the other hand, Wyan's definitely she definitely has a chance in this turn. We have one support Pokemon coming out on as a Grimmsnarl on Raghav's end, and a Groudon that's asleep. And she's just Dynamaxing this Groudon who is immune to any kind of Thunder Waves coming out. So I guess we'll have to see if Raghav retaliates with a trick. But if there's no trick in sight and the Grimmsnarl gets knocked out, then he's in a pretty bad position, but yeah, definitely doesn't fall for it, and the lagging tail goes back onto the Groudon yet again.
Yeah, Groudon stuck moving last again, but it is setting up the bulk to try to be able to survive, even given that position. I think a really crucial outcome of this turn, even though you don't clear that Grimmsnarl, that's totally fine. The Grimmsnarl really can't do anything right now. It had to accept that Assault Vest instead of the lagging tail, and this Gastrodon is starting to become quite a bit of a threat. Raghav really going for that Precipice Blades earlier, getting some damage into this Gastrodon, but it's slowly healing that back with leftovers, it's slowly building up special defense boosts, and it could be a really big problem for Raghav as time goes on.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like we just talked about earlier, maybe Raghav's aim was to get that chip damage on the Precipice Blades at the cost of the sleep, to get it in range of a max airstream from the Charizard, but almost certainly not anymore at this point, thanks to the Gastrodon, slowly healing back health with the leftovers, and on top of the max Quake that just went on top of it. I think this Gastrodon will be pretty hard to deal with, as we see a Precious Blades miss on top of the immediate wake up and a critical hit. Wow, there's a lot that just happened.
My apologies, I may have cut out for just a moment, but it looks like a whole lot is going on, getting that light Spirit Break off and Ice Beam coming out, being able to do a whole lot of damage to that Groudon. I may need you to fill me in on what just happened, Yuki. My apologies.
Oh, it's no problem. I think we got a first turn wake up over on the Groudon on Raghav's side, getting a Precious Blades, missing one of the Pokemon, but getting a critical hit on the other. And yeah, we just see the Max Rockfall, possibly reading a Charizard switching in on behalf of the Groudon.
Raghav making some really interesting calls with sort of the Yawn trade-offs, recognizing that there's just not a safe way to switch out of the Yawn, and just sort of accepting that sleep is really interesting. I think it's worked out okay for them so far, because Groudon just woke up really quickly and got that critical hit. Maybe not on the slot you want, but did still get a critical hit. But it's going to be a bit of a question. This Grimmsnarl really is just sitting here and not threatening at all, and it is tough for Raghav to figure out, is this Charizard going to be a safe switch-in, or is it going to be punished really heavily when it switches out?
Yeah, and I really love the swatch from Raghav's, Charizard. Just seeing the Max Rockfall the previous turn, just kind of, not do much at all into the Groudon. It's really safe, really mentally hard for Wai-Yin to go for the Max Rockfall again in the same slot, and Raghav just taking complete advantage of that psychology and saying, you know what, yeah, there's just no way you're gonna go for a Rockfall again, so I'm gonna get a safe switch into the Charizard, and I'm just gonna try to repeat what I did in game one. So just really phenomenal playing by Raghav here.
I don't think I've ever seen a more perfect Charizard switch in my life in terms of how that turned out. You waste a max turn from the Groudon, it doesn't get the special defense boost it needs for handling your Charizard, and now suddenly it's in such great position. Slot isn't up, but you just switched out your Groudon, and you can switch it back in now, and there's just so much this Charizard can do. Gastrodon's at half health, so it's not quite as threatening as it was before in terms of slowing this down.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see if Raghav, instead of Gigantamaxing straight away, whether he's going to just go for a Protect this turn, so that, he has the time to get the Grimmsnarl, who's a little bit more useless now, especially being asleep, bring in the Groudon so that in the following turn, he's able to get, 2 strong attacks off, but it sounds like he's going to go straight in for it. With all the Max Quake boosts, actually, I say all the Max Quake boosts, I think there's actually only one, because other than that, there was a Max Rockfall and a Max Quake that just went right under the Charizard, so... yeah, I think this Charizard might just be able to get a knockout on either of these Pokemon, depending on how they're trained.
Yeah, we're going to have to see which one it goes for. It is that Wildfire going into the Groudon through a special defense boost, but with that Assault Vest gone, it cannot hang on. And now this Wildfire being set up, this Gastrodon's no longer recovering HP each turn, it's now losing HP each turn. And yes, it gets that Yawn off. But sometimes Charizard really only needs just that Wildfire in a game, and now Raghav still has this choice that Yawn gives you. You can get a second attack off in this wonderful position, or you can switch and nothing will have happened to the Charizard if you do that.
Yeah, I think, for most players, you kind of hesitate to get your Dynamax off on a Pokemon while the Gastrodon is able to still Yawn you the following turn, but with the the Pokemon count being in Raghav's favor and still being able to get a lot of damage through Protects that are going to come out, I think it's quite obvious for both the Charizard and the Gastrodon to go for Protects this turn. You're still going to be taking a ton of damage, whether it's the Wildfire, the Solar Power coming out from Wai-Yin's Charizard, and the piercing damage. So yeah, I think Raghav just taking great advantage of the lead that he's got and making sure that it's not going to be widened.
We are going to see that Charizard not swapping out, Gastrodon going for Protect, and then the Airstream coming out. Is it into that Gastrodon or is it into the Charizard? And that's almost a complete KO, but not quite. This Charizard gets a chance to do something. It'll be knocked out by Solar Power at the end of the turn, but it can do something maybe unless this Groudon outspeeds, but it uses Precipice Blades going into that Gastrodon. And so this Charizard, against all odds, has survived this turn. And misses the Blast Burn. No, poor Charizard.
Yeah, that's pretty heartbreaking. I mean, just as the Charizard's about to faint, the best time to use Blast Burn is right when you're about to get knocked out by the Solar Power. You just get that one big hit and you don't have to, pay for the recoil because you're just going to faint anyways. But yeah, just not able to, just can't catch a break and just goes down without getting any damage out there. And now it's, Gastrodon against the world. And sometimes it works out, but it sounds like, YN notices it's not able to do a 1v4 and just throws in the towel. And Raghav just taking an absolutely commanding 2-0 victory here.
Yeah, that was such impressive play from Raghav in both sets. They did such a great job of balancing, I think, offense and defense, sort of pivoting around the Dynamax from the Charizard in the first game, around the Groudon Dynamax in the second game, and then both times bringing in that Charizard just perfectly timed at full health to or maybe one turn of Solar Power or Sand Chip, and then Dynamax and do just so much with the few turns that they had. I think he also identified like so many turns. I would never have thought I'd see a game where someone just accepts the sleep from Yon 3 times in a row. And it just felt like the right play every single time. And it was just such a treat to watch. And YN played so well and had so many angles into like keeping herself in this game and positioning things well. But it was such a tough and close match, played so brilliantly by Raghav. So congratulations to both players for a phenomenal showing and to India for getting that win.
Yeah, definitely. And we see an update just now that we have no new updates. So yeah, India's up 3-1 against Singapore. But just to go back a little bit on that match, yeah, I mean, I really want to focus down on the point that you made where Raghav just made such good use of both offense and defense. Like in game one, like it was just a perfect like kind of bait of that Lunala being taken back and wasting Wayne's max so that the Charizard could come in later and just be completely, unrivaled and be able to tear through Wayne's team. And then in the second match, we see something similar where just like game one, the Charizard just comes in unscathed in the perfect position possible, just using psychology in the best way possible, right? I mean, like technically there's still risk for Max Rockfall to still go through, and he would have just lost on the spot if Wyan had just done that 2 turns in a row. But Raghav is really trusting his opponent to just not do that and gets the Charizard in again at the perfect timing. And yeah, I think that's just what makes these teams so scary, is that you have this really centralizing Pokemon like Charizard, like this Meteor Beam Lunala, that can just really take the game on its own entirely. But then you have these really bulky Pokemon like Grimmsnarl, Incineroar, even Groudon can take more of a supporting role that can kind of stall things out in the early to mid game, and then the end game, boom, you don't even notice it, but you just have a perfectly positioned Charizard next to Groudon, and then it's game over. You don't even notice it. So just an excellent showing of like how that kind of team is played. And yeah, like big win for India. Just needs one more match win to make it to the coveted top 8.
Absolutely, just some spectacular play. We got to see like the pinnacle of Dynamax formats. You have like this passive play to survive the opponent's Dynamax, and then their timer runs out, and they're not Dynamax anymore, and you get those attacks. Such a treat. And yes, wonderful plays from both sides and some phenomenal results. But don't go just yet. We'll be back with 3 more matches, all of which will have wonderful, spectacular players. We're so excited to highlight matches, hopefully just at this caliber of these close, really tight matches. Even though this one was 2-0, it was such a phenomenal treat to watch. And we don't go anywhere because we'll be back quite soon.